Hello, everybody, and welcome to Heartlight Vedic Astrology. Today I was going to talk about planetary transits or Gochara for June 2025. This talk is from a Vedic astrology or Jyotish perspective, so ancient Indian astrology that's more than 5,000 years old. And it seems like the theme for this month is sudden decisions and directions. So let's take a look. Note beforehand, the information presented here is for educational purposes only. It should not be considered medical, financial, professional, or life advice of any kind. If you are in need, please contact an appropriate professional for support. Then you might take a minute or two to read the rest of this disclaimer. If you're new to Vedic astrology, Jyotish are my videos. All of my teaching videos on the subject are my concepts playlist. They can be found there. Wherever you see a double asterisk in one of my talks, that means there's a teaching video on that subject if you'd like to learn more. My channel is all about playlists, so that videos are easy to find on different topics. So like I have a Graha's planets playlist, Bhava's houses playlist, yoga's planetary combinations playlist, and there are others. If you'd like to learn astrology by looking at famous charts of people, places, and moments in time, I would check out my birth chart archive list 2025 video. I have a list of all the famous birth charts I've analyzed on the channel and the video you can find them in. Because kind of like this talk, even though the title is about monthly transits, I'm actually going to go through three different famous charts that mimic the current sky pattern, so we can see how those planetary energies, can be embodied, in the real world. Also, for those of you who are interested, auto dubbing is now available on this channel in several languages: French, German, Spanish, Portuguese, Italian, Hindi, Japanese, and Indonesian. So that may be helpful to some of you to get more out of this talk. Um, my last three teaching videos that I've posted, in case you missed any, are Scorpio constellation or Vrishika Rashi, Parvat and Kahala yogas for power, leadership, and wealth, and then what is mundane astrology. And then if you're new to all this but you want to learn more, I have a list at the bottom of the slide of foundational videos that I would suggest watching to get more out of talks like this and to start your journey in terms of learning Vedic astrology. Okay, so let's take a look at all the dates when things are moving in the sky. First off, so June 2nd, Mercury enters Mrigashirsha nakshatra. June 4th, Mars has an exact aspect on Rahu. June 5th, Rahu and Ketu leave Sandhi. Sandhi means that they're unstable. They're in the first or last degree of their sign. June 6th, Mercury enters Gemini or Mithuna Rashi constellation, and Mars enters Leo or Simha, as well as Magha Nakshatra that same day. June 7th, Sun enters Mrigashirsha Nakshatra. June 8th through 9th, we're going to have a planetary war or graha yuddha between Mercury and Jupiter. June 9th, Mercury enters Ardra Nakshatra, and Jupiter goes combust. It'll be combust for about a month. June 11th, there's going to be a full moon in Scorpio Vrishika Jyesta Nakshatra, and Mercury leaves combustion the same day. June 13th, Venus enters Bharani Nakshatra, and Jupiter enters Ardra Nakshatra. June 15th, Sun enters Gemini, so we're going to have a samkranti or sun changing signs. And then June 16th, Mercury enters Purnavasu Nakshatra. June 19th, Mars has an exact aspect on Saturn. June 20th is a solstice, June solstice, so that's a Dakshinayana in Sanskrit. I'm going to be doing a whole separate analysis on the solstice, so look out for that coming up in the next few weeks. June 21st, Sun enters Ardra Nakshatra. June 22nd, Mercury enters Cancer or Karaka Rashi constellation. June 24th, Mercury enters Pusha Nakshatra. June 25th, there's going to be a new moon in Gemini, Ardra Nakshatra specifically. June 26th, Venus enters Kritika Nakshatra. And then June 29th, Venus enters Taurus or Vrishabha constellation. And then June 30th, Mars enters Purva Falguni Nakshatra. So we had a lot moving around in the sky this month. Okay, so first off, let's take a look at how the whole sky is shifting over the course of the month. So on this slide, I have a chart for June 1st, the beginning of the month, and then the last day of the month, June 30th, on the right, just so we can see how things are moving along here. So both of these charts, well, first off, I should say they're North Indian style charts if you're not familiar with that. So to orient you to a North Indian style chart, The top diamond in the middle is what we call the ascendant, the first house, the rising sign, or in Sanskrit, the lugna. Okay. And you can see there's a little one in the bottom corner. That little one actually refers to the constellation of the house. So even though it is the first house, when we have one in the first house, that means we have the first constellation of Aries or Mesha in the first house. So this is Aries. These are both Aries rising charts, and I specifically oriented them that way because when you have Aries in the first house, you can basically, that's kind of like setting up a birth chart for the whole world or humanity. So we're looking at collective energy in these charts, okay? Um, and then to get to the other houses in the North Indian scale chart, you count counterclockwise or up and to the left. So that upside down triangle in the top left corner with the little 2 in the bottom corner, that's the second house. And we have second constellation there of Taurus. So Taurus is in the second house with Mercury and Sun in that left-sided chart. Okay. And then you can count all the way around to get to the other houses. Okay, so this first chart on the left is set for June 1st, 2025. The time, it's not so critical because I set them both for 1 degree of Aries, both the charts, but it's 3:10 a.m. Eastern Daylight Time. That's New York time. And again, it's Aries or Mesha rising Lugna chart. Okay, so the moon nakshatra is in Ashlesha at this particular time. Ashlesha is nakshatra, if you're not familiar, is a lunar mansion. There are about 27 lunar mansions. Every night the moon passes through a different one. They all have different energies and symbolisms associated with them. So Ashlesha is symbolized by a snake. Okay, so moon is going to be strong because it's in its own house. You can see here in the fourth house, it's in Cancer, which it owns, it rules. So that's going to make the house strong, but moon is an exaggerated condition because it is what we call swa in its own house. That's going to make it strong, but there's also some trouble here because moon represents, like as a person, moon represents mother, and the fourth house represents mother as well. So the fourth house also represents things like home and happiness. Okay. So with the moon represents the intuitive mind or emotional mind. So it looks like there's some, trouble here, maybe high emotions and troubling emotions going on with these sorts of things, like potentially mother, home, happiness. Okay. And the thing is, you can see with moon is Mars. Okay. And Mars is also in Ashlesha. So we double up on that Ashlesha energy of the snake. If moon was in Cancer by itself, I would see this as being like a bit of a mental, emotional, maybe trouble, upset, disturbance. But especially with Mars, Mars is a natural malefic planet, and Mars has the energy of being like assertive, rebellious, sometimes aggressive, maybe violent even, especially since it's in the debilitation sign of Cancer. What I'm seeing here is there's some sort of mental upset or disturbance going on initially, okay, regarding fourth house matters. And the moon, as I mentioned, represents mother. It's in the fourth house of mother. And when you have moon in the fourth house, that's what we call a karako bhava nasha, indicating that there are problems with the person associated with that planet and house. So it looks like there's problems with mom. Not necessarily between the native and mom, but mom might be having troubles of her own, physically, mentally, financially. It can be all kinds of things. Okay, so trouble going on there, starting off. And then the dasha period or planetary period is Mercury and Rahu. Okay, so this is already telling me that there's more sort of mental disturbance going on here. Mercury is the other planet representing the mind, but Mercury represents the analytical, logical mind. And Rahu is the north node of the moon. And Rahu represents sudden, hidden, unexpected things, bizarre things you can't really anticipate. And then Rahu also represents ambition. So Rahu is in the 11th house of clubs, group, society, also income, and also gambling as well. And then Mercury is in the second house of family and inner circle. So again, we're bringing energy, or we're bringing up energy related to home, family, that sort of thing, but also clubs, groups, and society. So there might be like a tension here between deciding, where to put one's attention or mind, emotions, that sort of thing, or there's a struggle going on here. So there are a bunch of yogas in this chart. Yogas are planetary combinations. They give special meta effects to a chart that are beyond just analyzing planet by planet or house by house. So we do have kartari yoga in this chart. We have Saturn in the 12th house and Sun, Mercury in the second house. So we have, in this chart, Mercury would be considered a natural malefic because it's with the natural malefic Sun. Mercury can go either way depending on what it's associated with. So basically, we have two negative planets in the second house and a negative planet, Saturn, in the 12th house. So we have negative planets flanking the lugna. And what that does is it creates obstacles and barriers. Okay, some challenge here that, again, if this is a person's chart that they're up against. And especially since we're, dinging Mercury here because of the planetary period. And during the planetary period, the planets that are running are planets that you can see as sort of more active or more influential in somebody's chart. So we're pinging on this Mercury. And Mercury can represent things like decisions, communication, especially since the second house also represents oral communication. And what else? Also assets, that sort of thing. So it looks like there might be some discussions, difficult discussions going on here. Mercury and Sun, you can see they're both pretty close to each other. They're both in this nakshatra Rohini at this time. Rohini is actually a very nice nakshatra. It's considered to be the most attractive, kind of seductive, luscious, voluptuous, fertile type of energy, which is pretty nice. But the thing is that Saturn is aspecting from the 12th house onto the second house. So Saturn is a planet representing obstacles, delays, destruction, chronic disease, death even. And Saturn happens to be in a nakshatra called Uttara Uttara Bhadrapada, which is symbolized by the back legs of a funeral pyre. So we have the planet of destruction and death on the funeral pyre. So another symbol of destruction and death and chaos and transformation. And it happens to be in the 12th house of losses and expenditures. Okay. So since Saturn is aspecting the second house, I would imagine that there's some issues going on there. And, despite there being some nice things going on here in the second house of Mercury and Sun, Mercury is a fast moving planet. It's going to move out here pretty quickly, and the Sun as well. So it looks like whatever niceties are happening in the second house of family and inner circle will be diminishing. Okay, so this kartari yoga again, the negative planets on either side of the lugna here. Then we have solar and lunar yogas here. So the sun, luckily, is flanked by two benefics. It's got Jupiter on one side and the second house from it, and Venus on the 12th house from it. So that's going to support Jupiter's sun. Sun represents things like soul, career, health, that sort of thing. So that's pretty nice. So that's going to be positive. The moon, we have Jupiter as a natural benefic true planet on the 12th house from the moon. That's going to support the moon a bit in terms of what it's doing, in feeling and that sort of thing. Probably bringing a little bit of peace, or maybe looking for peace, looking for balance here. Okay. There is also a Kala Sarpa yoga in this chart. So Kala Sarpa is when you have all the planets on one side or the other, the Rahu Ketu axis. That brings ambition and again more unusual energy. And then there's also some instability here as well. So we have a sandhi, Rahu, Ketu, and Venus. So 3 planets out of 9 are sandhi. So in the first or last degree of the sign, that brings inherent instability because when you change signs, you're changing elements as well. So like you're going from fire to earth or earth to water, or so that creates instability. Okay. So Mars again is, an exaggerated condition. It is debilitated, but because it's with its swa disposer, so disposer is kind of the landlord or ruler, owner of the house it's in. Well, not the house, but the constellation it's in. That's going to be a nicha bhanga Mars. So that's going to pull Mars up out of its debilitation to some degree, not fully out of it. So that's going to help Mars. But then again, the moon is exaggerated, being swa, strong that way. Karako nasha, kind of weakened that way. And then also it has Digbala directional strength. So again, we have an exaggerated moon. So again, a lot going on mentally, probably more emotionally, because this is all happening in Cancer, a water sign, water representing emotions typically. There is also Chandramangala yoga here, so that's picking up like wealth, especially related to property, which again, we're already picking up wealth because Mercury's in the second house of assets and Rahu's in the 11th house of income. And then this is also Mongolic chart here. So Mars is in the fourth house. That brings a Mongolic energy. That can indicate issues with especially spouse and marriage. And then also we have a Buddhadichi yoga. So there's Mercury and Sun in the same house, and that's qualified by being related to the first, second, or fifth house. That brings intelligence, especially relating to like math and science. So it's more like a calculating type of intelligence more than like an emotional type of intelligence. There is also Parvata yoga here. So Parvata yoga is a dispositor yoga. So the dispositor of the first house is Mars. Okay. And Mars is debilitated, but the dispositor of Mars is Moon, which is Swa. Okay. So that's going to be Parvata yoga. That's going to bring strength to the first house. And the first house is important because it represents the overall tone or vibe of the chart. Also, the general, again, if this is a person, the general physicality or personality, kind of what they're known for, what they're first known for. Not necessarily getting under the hood of the car, into the deep, inner workings of somebody, but it's sort of a general presentation, outward presentation to the world. Okay, so you can see like there's troubles here, there's money involved here, intelligence, like trying to figure things out. Okay. Look like, and then the reason why there might be some troubles going on here is because of the Saturn. We're not, digging specifically on Saturn in this chart, but Saturn recently, well, not so recently, I guess the end of March, so about 2 months ago, shifted from Aquarius, where it was very strong and providing protection to the 11th house of clubs, group society, and income. And now it shifted to the 12th house of losses and expenditures. So that's not so new, but what is new is that Venus, you can see, being sandhi, has just recently, in the last few days, moved out of its exaltation sign of Pisces in the 12th house, where Venus was providing some protection. Okay, and so Saturn is there, and so Saturn again is going to be creating losses because it owns the 10th house and the 11th house. So losses regarding work, losses regarding income, and losses regarding groups. So as I mentioned, this might be indicating that recession is happening or on its way. Okay, globally, for all of us, and there seem to be some indications of that, regarding global economics. So if we put this all together, we've got upset at home, happiness. Also, the fourth house is moksha sthana, so a house of freedom. So it might be like trying to hem things in or regain some sort of order, to losses that have happened here. But also, like since Venus and Moon are in the Kendras, the four houses in the middle, which is the core of the chart, Venus and Moon are the two creativity and two aesthetic planets here. So it might be that, like, if this is a person, they were, very interested in those sorts of things. But it might also be that there's sort of like a kitty cover, to the deeper workings going on here. So it might be people are not really showing so much the um, troubles going on, for them, mental emotional troubles going on. The other thing is that Venus is aspecting the 12th house, or sorry, the seventh house here. The seventh house relates to partner, spouse like, spouse or spouse like partner, business partners, and also independent business. And so with Venus aspecting its own sign in the seventh house, that could be that there's some new creative venture going on. This could be maybe a little bit more romance going on with partners or some new romantic partner popping up on the scene, that kind of thing. But especially with Venus being a planet of creativity, aspecting its own sign in the seventh house. The seventh house also represents like the path in life. So this could be representing a whole new sort of creative but practical way of moving through the world. moving forward, especially because Venus also represents not only arts and creativity and aesthetics, but it also represents the worldly counselor. So it's about kind of, I think, after some sort of loss that's happened, like, starting to try to get like the ducks back in a row, maybe through some sort of new creative venture or a side hustle that's going to generate some money, since that seems to be on the mind. And then if we look at the second chart, so how's that all shifting? Well, you can see Venus is no longer in the first house. Um, Jupiter's still where it is. Sun is now in the third house. Mercury's moved on, and Mars and Moon and Ketu are now in the fifth house. But Rahu, Saturn, Jupiter, yeah, the slow-moving planets, they're where they are. They won't be moving for a while, like probably about a good year, because they just all moved in the last 2 months. So this is the new sort of game board we're dealing with. So in the second chart, the Moon nakshatra the Moon is now in Purva Falguni, which is about creativity and finer things of life and that sort of thing. Um, and then the nakshatra can also be about creativity as well. So we're still bringing up this sort of creative energy here. The thing though is that it might be a little bit of, I would say, like maybe destructive creativity or explosive creativity, or maybe it could also be, if we're going to look at this in the best possible light, it could also be like more of like a digital or technical innovation type thing, creativity, because of Moon being with Mars and K2. So Mars can represent machines, and K2 can represent like technology. Okay, so there might be some sort of technical innovation here. But the thing too is that Mars and K2 are two explosive planets, literally. So this could be like at least in the first chart, there's some mental emotional disturbance, but there's still some sort of containment around it. But it looks like things might be sort of blowing up, in more of a public way, because the fifth house here, where Mars, Moon, and K2 are, the natural fifth house is represented by Leo, and Leo can indicate like a stage. So there might be sort of more outward, expression of the troubles that have been going on, or kind of um, coming about in the beginning of the month, you know. And that's also like, as we talk more in depth about what's going on, like a lot of these planets, they're moving into harsher nakshatras, more sudden, unexpected. And that's why the theme of the month is sudden, decisions and actions and stuff. Because like Mercury and Sun are in Rohini right now. Rohini is like all about like gardening and fashion and all these like nice, kind of you know, uh, lovely, exciting, but peaceful things. But like at the end of the month, like Jupiter and Sun are now in Ardra. Ardra is symbolized by a storm cloud, or a drop of water. The drop of water can indicate like storm like water from a storm, or a teardrop. So Ardra is related to like psychology, insights in the better case, but also sadness potentially, but sudden unexpected events, like almost like if you watch tarot card readings, like a tower moment. Okay. So we're going from this sort of, keeping things contained. There's some things boiling under the surface, but, contained, and at the beginning, to sudden shifts and movement. And then again, Moon is no longer in its own house where it's strong. It's with Mars and K2 in the fifth house, where the Cancer is a movable water sign, so there's a lot of motions going on. But now we're in a fixed fire sign with two fiery planets, and Mars is an erratic planet, and K2 is as well. Actually, K2 is like an exaggerated Mars, but even more expected. So this might be like more like emotional outbursts going on, literally publicly. Um, And then Saturn and Rahu are still in pretty hardcore nakshatras. Saturn's in Uttara Bhadrapada, and Rahu is going to be in Purva Bhadrapada. So the front and back legs of a funeral pyre. That's not super fun. Easy, These aren't easy. Those aren't easy breezy nakshatras. And then Venus is, it's sandhi, but Venus at the end of the month is going to be in Kritika nakshatra. Kritika is a dual nakshatra, symbolized by Kartikeya, the commander in chief of the celestial army. And so there's a fighting, even like a military type energy there, but also fostering as well. So it's kind of dual. Luckily, Venus is a diplomatic planet, so you might be getting a little bit more of that fostering mother energy. Um, but there's still a fight there. So usually when I see planets in Critica, um, it depends, especially if they're more of the natural benefic um, not planets like Venus or Jupiter or Mercury, maybe Moon. Uh, you can get more of like an advocacy type energy, especially since Venus is in the second house of oral communication. I could see that being even more so about advocacy. And also potentially assets, because Venus also represents, wealth and money, of different kinds. And we're also, the dasha period is Venus, Venus, Mercury for the second chart. So we're bringing up even more of this Venus energy. And let's see, Venus, since Venus is also the lord of the seventh house, this might be like gaining support of the inner circle. Like maybe the first half of the month is like just sort of developing the idea, or kind of thinking about the idea, or getting a few people on board, and then Venus might be like making some sort of announcement um, about seventh house issues, so spouse, like partner, also independent business or a new path in life, that sort of thing. This might be like sharing with people, especially um, with inner circle, some new direction, and maybe again it's related to some new business endeavor. Um, Venus in its own sign, the second house, will provide some protection for family and assets. Um, an inner circle. What else do we have here? Mercury. So Mercury's in the fourth house now. So Mercury in the 10. So Mercury is also providing some sort of nurturing energy as well, because Mercury at the end of the month is going to be in Pusha nakshatra. Pusha is symbolized by cow's udder. So you get a lot of like emotional and physical stability that comes from that kind of like, in India, part of the reason why cows are revered so much is that, that they provide milk. And I know there's a lot of controversy about like milk, in modern day nutrition or whatever, but, in India, it's considered to be a great gift and compassionate gift from the cow to other species. Like if you get milk from a cow and give it to a baby of any other species, that's a pretty generous cow to be giving away its resources like that to provide growth and stability for some other being or animal. So that energy is going on as well. So since we're picking up Venus, Venus, Mercury here, that's kind of nice. But again, we'll see that, yeah, the distant period changes pretty fast. So, because it's based on the moon, and the moon changes nakshatras every night, and the nakshatras have different lords. So that's what determines the dasha period. Um, yeah. So anyway, there are a bunch of yogas in the second chart as well. Not as many, but we do have lunar and solar yogas again. So luckily, like natural benefic planets on either side of the sun, that's going to support the sun, health and purpose, work, career, sort of thing. There is Mercury will be a natural benefic at the end of the month because it's by itself. It's not influenced by a natural malefic. So there will be some support also for the moon, because the moon is going to be submerged by this Mars and Ketu energy, for a few days. Again, there might be some outbursts going on here. We still have a pravraja yoga, but not still. We have a pravraja yoga. So there's going to be a focus here on this Mars, Moon, Ketu, uh, event going on here in the fifth house. So this might be something public as well, because the moon represents the public. There might be some sort of public outburst, not just by a person, but by some sort of leading entity, because Mars represents leadership, especially like a commander in chief of the army. So there might be some sort of military outburst or outbreak that happens here, unfortunately. Chandra Mangala yoga, so there's still something about wealth going on here. and call the sarpa yoga. So we still got some sort of unusual ambition going on as well. So there can be, losses and sadness going on here. Also, the fifth house represents children. So this might be specifically, this public outburst might specifically be related to children, unfortunately. But there's also some creativity and leadership, but, explosive mind and actions going on here. Because again, by that time, let's see, we're going to have Jupiter, Sun, Ardra, again, that lightning strike energy. Mercury is in Pusha. Venus is in Kritika. Mars is in Maga. Moon is in. Yeah, I mean, Mercury's the only planet, and Mercury's a fast moving planet, so it's not going to stay in Pusha very long, but it might be like an attempt to uh, stabilize home or, stabilize mother. Because again, Moon is going to be impacted by Mars and K2. So there might be more disturbances to home and mom and happiness. Yeah, so it looks like things are essentially heating up by the end of the month. Like there's kind of a little bit of a lull, and things were, maybe not going well, but still, it was still within some sort of order, or at least superficially, the appearances of order. And now it looks like things are definitely shifting out of that place by the end of the month. So let's take a look planet by planet, see what we have going on. So on this slide, we have the Mercury or Buddha and Venus Shukra transits going on in June. So June 2nd, Mercury enters Mrigashirsha Nakshatra. So Mrigashirsha is all about like seeking and searching. And Mercury is about, business, communication, ideas, decisions, that sort of thing, planning. So it looks like with these two, mind is going to be doing a lot of searching and seeking mentally for answers. This might also be like a bit of a marketing flourish for some people, because Mrigashirsha can be like seeking new business, like through marketing, activities. June 6th, Mercury enters Gemini or Mithuna, which should be pretty nice because that's a swa, constellation for Mercury. That's going to make Mercury strong. And when planets or houses are strong, basically they give the best of what they can give. So, yeah. And then, so Mercury again is the analyzing logical planet, and Gemini is a dual air sign. So there's going to be a lot of processing, decision making, communication, education potentially is where, well, like Mercury represents education. And maybe some, lighter side, because Mercury can represent like joking around and that sort of thing. So maybe some sort of, lightness going on here, jib jabbing, communication wise, and maybe news as well, because Mercury and Jupiter will both be in Gemini. And, again, Mercury and Jupiter both represent kind of happiness and not happiness, but like joking around, but also they represent news and media. So it looks like there might be, that kind of stuff going on. June 8th through 9th, there's going to be a planetary war between Mercury and Jupiter. So Mercury again represents knowledge, Jupiter represents wisdom. Mercury represents intellect, Jupiter represents intuition. So again, there's going to be waffling back and forth of the mind, like how do we make decisions? There's a lot of information being processed, but then how do we decide on what to use, to make decisions moving forward? Then June 9th, Mercury enters Ardra Nakshatra. So this can start to get intense because again, Ardra is that storm cloud energy. This might be sudden insights. On the upside, this could be like sudden insights or epiphanies, but there can also be like a sudden whirling of thoughts, like a mental storm going on here. And that will, happen for about a week until Mercury moves into the next nakshatra. Although it's not a calm, the next nakshatra is not calm. It's calmer, but not really calm on its own. There's still a lot of activity going on there. June 11th, Mercury leaves combustion. So again, when a planet's combust, it means that the internal activities or association symbolisms are more prevalent. So that means that there's a lot of mental processing going on before this, and maybe decisions happening. And then once Mercury leaves combustion, that's when, like, again, more of the communication, outward expressions of Mercury might happen. Yeah. So bringing the inner work that's been taking place, forward and making it more external. June 13th, Venus enters Bharani nakshatra. That nakshatra is symbolized by a womb. So there's cycles of birth and death. And since Venus is a natural benefic, I would see like maybe a birthing of new relationships could be, because Venus represents relationships, love, romance. And Venus also represents the arts. So there could be some new art or relationship that's emerging here. Venus also represents pets. So maybe you have a pet, maybe you're adopting a new kitten or a puppy or something like that, or your dog or cat is having puppies and kittens, that kind of thing. June 16th, the Mercury enters Punarvasu nakshatra. So Punarvasu again is more, is not necessarily as cataclysmic as Ardra. But Punarvasu is symbolized by a quiver of arrows. So there's this box, usually people hang on their back with the arrows and they take out an arrow and they sling it, string it up on their bow and then they shoot it off and then they'll go retrieve the arrow and put it back in the box. So there's this energy of cycling and movement, like, and it can also be like traveling, and Mercury represents traveling. So there could be like more traveling towards the end of the month. But there's also this sharp point on Punarvasu. So there could be sharp words that are had back and forth going on, with somebody or something, or, it could be sharp thoughts. So that sort of thing. In June 22nd, Mercury enters Cancer or Karaka. So that's going to be a shift for Mercury because it's an enemy sign. The other thing is that Mercury, again, is a logical, analytical planet, and Cancer is all about water. It's all about emotion. So it's about like you're going from sort of mental processing to like emotional processing. So maybe because of what happened and when Mercury's in Punarvasu, again, if there were some sharp words that were exchanged with somebody, then it's sort of like, facing the emotional outcomes or fallout from that. The other thing is it's like when Mercury enters Cancer, it's kind of like moving from, because Mercury can be really in its head. I mean, because Mercury's a logical, analytical planet, and Gemini is a, dual air sign. So it's all about like thinking back and forth and da, da, da. Sometimes it's really hard for folks who have a strong energy like that to make decisions and move forward on anything in a tangible, practical way. But it's also like, it's one thing to think up some ideas, and write them down and then actually execute them, actually like move on them. And that's when it's sort of like moving from looks good on paper to reality. And is it actually a practical idea? Is it something that's actionable in any meaningful way? Then June 24th, Mercury enters Pusha Nakshatra. So again, there's trying to find some sort of mental emotional stability. It looks like some sort of, maybe sharp exchange that happened. Or again, if there were some insights as well, like maybe there were some insights that's like, whoa, I was totally in the dark about that, or I was in denial about that, or something. And it's sort of trying to get, your legs, emotional legs back under you. Then June 26th, Venus enters Kritika Nakshatra again. Fighting and nurturing simultaneously. And since Venus is more of a lover than a fighter, you might get a little bit more of the nurturing energy, but there's still some sort of kind of fiery nature here. So again, this might be nurturing through advocacy. And also Venus represents art. So in Kritika, the symbol of that nakshatra is a sharp instrument. So this could be some sort of art involving sharp instruments, like maybe writing or sewing or hairstyling with the scissors and all that. That sort of, takes place. And then June 29th, Venus enters Taurus constellation or Vrishabha Rashi. And that should be pretty nice in a way. Venus will provide some protection since it owns Taurus. And Venus will start to get grounded because it's moving out of Aries, which is a movable fire sign. So there's probably a lot of action going on. But now it's about, again, like, now the rubber is going to meet the road in terms of like, well, which of these actions in the sphere of Venus are stabilizing and grounding and realistic, because you can generate a lot of creative ideas, but then it's like, well, which ones, are you gonna choose to move on and pursue? So it looks like It'll be nice for a while for Venus to be in Taurus. It should be there for about a month or so. So most of July, I believe. Part of July, because then it's going to move into Gemini anyway. Yeah, so for a few weeks at least, Venus should be a little bit more stable. And then let's see, what do we have next? Okay, so this is our first famous chart, and this chart is the chart of the United Nations Charter that was signed. It was signed on June 26, 1945. I don't have a birth time for it, so this is a Surya Lagna or sun rising chart. It was signed at a convention, UN conference convention in San Francisco, California, United States. And you can see right at the top, as I talked about, like, Mercury moving into Gemini, Sun in Gemini, and you can see we've got that going on. Like, there's a lot of Gemini energy here. So again, a lot of ideas, a lot of thoughts, a lot of writing, and that's essentially what the United Nations Charter was all about. Basically what they did was they got 50 countries to agree, which was phenomenal. It seems like it's hard to even get 50 countries in a room, let alone agree on anything. But the original 50 countries who were part of the designing of the UN Charter actually unanimously signed it on this day, which is pretty phenomenal. And actually, it's also, which seems unusual, and it is, because you can also see in this chart that there was a lunar eclipse that just happened, with a few hours of the signing of the UN Charter. So that's where that, Rahu and Ketu, you can see Sun and Moon are within about 10 degrees of Rahu Ketu. That's usually where usually when it's about 9 degrees, we see that we're pretty close to an eclipse, and literally an eclipse, a lunar eclipse happened within a few hours of this. So that brings that kind of unusual energy of Rahu Ketu, but also, since Rahu's at the top here, like ambition. Yeah. Okay. So yeah. So, without even going into details of the chart, you can see like a lot of discussion and negotiation and decision making and this sort of thing. And Sun is there. Sun is like government, some sort of government or governor, that sort of thing. Rahu is ambition, unusual energy. Saturn is structure. Saturn and Mercury are both combust because they're so close to the sun you can't see them in the sky with your eyes. So the internal qualities of debate and decisions and thinking and processing structurally on structure of some ambitious structure of government is what is on deck here, essentially. Okay. There's also a pravraja yoga here, so you have 4 planets and positive sign. That's going to be a life focus. There's been a lot of energy going into mentally processing this new ambitious structure of some governing body. Okay, so let's go through a little bit more systematically, get into some details. So Lagna Nakshatra, I don't know because I don't have a birth time here. The Sun Nakshatra is an Ardra, so again, governing insights here. Probably pretty spectacular, given again, like I was just kind of amazed at that they unanimously signed 50 countries. I mean, that's pretty impressive. Sometimes it's hard to get even 2 or 3 countries to agree on anything, right? So the moon nakshatra is in Purva. Well, it shifts about halfway through the day, like early in the afternoon. So it's either in Purva Ashada, which is the sorting energy. So again, mentally sorting through, emotionally sorting through issues, or in Uttara Ashada. So Uttara Ashada is like a piercing victory. So maybe at the beginning of the day, there was a sorting through process, and then towards the end of the day, there was that, yay, sudden win going on. K2 is also in Purva Ashada, so there's a lot of like K2 can have more of a separationist energy there, so it could be like the end of sorting through, the end of seeking and sorting, and it's just finally like, let's just do this and sign off on this kind of energy. Daylord is Mars. I'm assuming this happened during fairly regular hours, after 8 o'clock or so. So Mars is an innovative, rebellious, like initiative type planet. So we've got that going on. Mars is particularly strong at Swa in its own sign, in the 11th house of clubs, groups, and society. So this is like literally like, and it's in Bharani Nakshatra. So birthing some new innovative group, And Venus is there also in Bharani. And Venus, again, we mentioned it in Bharani, could be like um, the birthing of a new diplomatic organization, because Venus represents diplomacy, also a social grace, uh, birthing social grace, birthing, this is all happening in the 11th house of income, so birthing better financial circumstances. And Venus is also the practical counselor. So this is like birthing a new, innovative, um, diplomatic institution or group here. That's what we got going on. The Hra Lord, Our Lord, I don't know because I don't have a birth time. The birth dasha was either Venus or Sun. Again, that can switch about midday. Venus is, again, diplomacy, social good, grace, finer things of life. Sun is leadership. How this recreates the current sky pattern. Well, we have Sun and Mercury in Gemini and Venus in Aries. So we've got those things similar. So if we go through house by house, the Lugna is Gemini or Midtuna, again, a dual air sign, a lot of thinking, processing going on. Again, we have a lunar eclipse or chandra graha, and that's going to bring ambition and unusualness to this chart. Pravraja yoga brings focus. Bhadra, we also have a Bhadra yoga here. So Mercury in its own sign in a Kendra or Trikona. Kendras are the four houses in the middle. Gives a Bhadra yoga, which is a very strong intelligence, analytical presence. It's considered a Pancha Mahapurush yoga. So there are five of those, and Bhadra yoga is what that essentially means is the five great beings. So this is like a huge, uh, ambitious, unusual brainchild was birthed here. And group. Sort of, well, it's kind of both, right? I mean, because Mars can also be like literally police and like enforcement, and Venus is like the the social grace. So it's like the stick and the carrot together, essentially, because they do both. I mean, they're trying to promote better circumstances for being and for beings, you know, rights and respect and standards of living around the world. They're also a bit of the intergovernmental, country sort of law enforcement. I mean, how well they do either, I really don't know, frankly, because I don't closely follow them. I'm sure there are debates about that. But the thing is that, originally there were 51 countries involved in starting this. 50 out of 51 signed on this day. The one that did not sign was Poland. I think they signed on this 2 months later, and I don't know why. And now, currently, of the 195 independent governing bodies, countries, you could say, around the world, 193 of them are members of the UN. The only two that are not part of this, as far as I know, are the Vatican City and the state of Palestine. So, I mean, that's pretty amazing that, like, again, like, people actually are on board with this. Again, whether they agree with it or whether they approve of it or how much they're actually doing, I don't know. I don't know how to evaluate that. So anyway, but probably just the fact that it exists, even in theory, is probably a pretty nice sign of um, wanting to better humanity. Yeah, which is pretty nice. So again, that gets back to diplomacy and leadership. Venus, Sun, Dasha, Mahadasha, either one. So we've got the Vajra yoga intelligence. We have a Parvata yoga as well because Mercury is the dispositor of the Lugna and it's in its own sign. So it's also going to bring strength. Besides Mercury being in its own sign, and also Mercury has Digbal and directional strength. So exceptional intelligence and debate and decision making going on here. The only, I think, drawback though is that Saturn and Sun and Rahu are all natural malefics. So and the thing is that the only planet you can see is the sun because Rahu is always invisible. It's a calculation, not like a mass related planet. And Saturn and Mercury combo. So um, at least something was achieved. But again, with the malefics on Mercury, it was probably a lot for this Mercury to sort of like work through all of that negative energy, frankly. And I think Sun and Saturn both Yeah, Sun and Saturn are both in Ardra. So the reason why this even sort of was became a thought or a thing was Sun and Saturn in Ardra. This is like sadness of government. It's like Saturn is like the past. It's like history, and Sun is government. So it's like there's sadness of loss or destruction through um, governing bodies. And so how do we like try to ameliorate that? How do we try to prevent that moving forward? And the thing is like maybe I don't know how much the UN actually does. Probably better. But the thing is like when things really hit the decks, really hits the fan. I mean, at least there's some sort of organization that's in place to potentially hash out issues. Whereas before there was like no structure. Everybody kind of side dealing with whoever their allies were. But now it's like if there's actually like some, at least attempt even of a world organization that provide some forum to discuss and debate and think and decide for the whole world, it's probably better off than not. I'm guessing, but I don't know for sure. So anyway, but that's part of why because this was again post World War II. And especially with all the things that went on in post World War II on the European front and the Asian front, like it's like, somehow we've got to find some more common, longer term alliances and forums and, place to deal with these things, hopefully before they really blow up into something huge like that again. Um, and the thing is, like Mars is bhavam in this chart. So Mars is the ruler of the sixth house of acute issues, and it's gone six houses away. So this is like trying to ameliorate, one issue after another blowing up here. One also six houses enemies, one enemy after another, like emerging, like trying to quell those negative forces that pop up through history rather than let them fester and then become this, horribly destructive event or something like that. I mean, we still have those going on in the world, so yeah, I don't know. It's not, perfect, but it's at least it's something, I guess. So, um, yeah, and then Mercury here. So Sun and Saturn are in Ardra. Oh, actually, all three of them. So Sun, Rahu, and Saturn are all in Ardra. I thought for a second I thought Rahu was in Margashira, but no, there are three planets in Ardra. I mean, that's a lot of destructive energy, especially since they're all malefics. You're going to get the more negative side of that ardor energy of like sudden bolt of lightning, destructive energy, getting hit by a bolt of lightning. But Mercury, though, is trying to, like, again, sort through and try to decide how to contain that from happening again in the future, like enemies emerging or any kind of issues emerging, sudden, unexpected issues. So yeah, so again, all this together, turning through multiple discussions or debate, you could say decisions, writing, and ideas, because Mercury also represents writing. So actually writing this thing up and signing off on it. The second house lord is Moon. It's aspected by debilitated Mars in Bharani. So again, there's some debate going on here with the new unusual group beginning. Third house lord is Sun. Jupiter's in Uttara Phalguni. So that's I'd say like a enjoyment, but with purpose. Yeah, Uttara Phalguni is like the finer things of life, but with purpose. So it's not just like a fluffy superficial type thing, but it's trying to again improve lives and also improve laws, and by creating this publication, because Jupiter in the third house will indicate like publication. So then Saturn again in Ardra combust is going to be like past grievances. So it probably seems like rather than pass through all the negativity in the past, it's like, okay, well, how do we start to move forward in a positive way or more real, like a, logical way that's not going to be like so like cataclysmic, like what, because they just went through like two world wars. I mean, it's like, we got to stop this nonsense. So anyway, yeah, publication, third house publication regarding past underlying leadership grievances I put here in my notes. So fourth house lord is Mercury. Mercury is very strong. It has Digwell again, directional strength, and it's Swa. It is combust though. So again, this is like putting home and happiness in order in a tangible way. Fifth house lord is Venus, aspects its own, so it's going to make the fifth house strong. And Venus is the worldly counselor, and the fifth house is like counseling. So a lot of good practical advice are emerging. And then Mars as well, so innovative practical counsel regarding new group starts. Sixth house lord is Mars, aspects its own, so there's going to be strength here. But again, it's also bhavat bhavam, so it's going to be like new method for managing emerging threats and enemies. Then the seventh house lord is Jupiter. It aspects its own, so there's going to be strength here as well. Ketu's in Purvashada. Moon is in one of the Ashadas. And it's also aspected by Mercury, Sun, Saturn. So sorting through leadership, philosophy, debate, form going forward. Um, eighth house lord is Saturn. So again, past sadness, losses, anxiety. Ninth house lord is also Saturn, but it's aspect by Jupiter. So writing a compassionate, fair, legal, kind of writing it up, the institution, like the writing this up is the first step in actually, making it a tangible entity. And then the 10th house lord is Jupiter. It's aspected by Saturn again. Again, there's mixed feelings about regarding past structure and historical sadness and destruction through past historical events. And that's again part of what they're trying to ameliorate here, and then find some new solution for going forward. The 11th house is Swan Mars and Venus and Barney, birthing a new issue counseling resolution group, essentially, you could say. 12th house lord is Venus. It's and Venus, the lord of the 12th house, is gone the 11th. So Venus is also bhavat bhavam, which is interesting. So yeah, so this is going to be the end of endings, the loss of losses, trying to put a stopgap on like this massive destruction that's happened in the world. Um, so, actively stopping global losses and, through peace and collaboration, essentially, is what's going on. So let me just see the last bits here in case there's anything I missed. So mandates members to maintain global peace and security. That's what this charter does, to uphold international law, to promote, achieve higher standards of living, promote universal respect and rights. Again, this is a post-World War II maneuver here. This is what blew my mind. Signed, unanimously signed by 50 countries, and now 193 members. And I think right now their slogan is peace, dignity, equality, and a healthy planet. So at least in theory, these are supposed to be the do-gooders here. Um, again, how much that actually works in reality, I have no idea. But yeah, I mean, it's pretty impressive nonetheless that this happened at all. So there you go. So a lot of energy and in Gemini and Ardra specifically with this chart. Okay, so on this planet we have the two favorite planets, Sun, Surya, and Mars, Mongol, and their transits for June. So June 4th, Mars has an exact aspect on Rahu. Well, that can be, a pretty sudden, explosive action of some kind. Mars is action, and Rahu's like ambition, also hidden, unusual, unexpected. So sudden move forward, but maybe even like impulsive or compulsive energy. Because this is an exact aspect on Rahu, but Mars is like, again, aspecting the whole constellation or house that Rahu's in. So this could be a lot of action forward regarding Aquarius house issues, like for everybody. June 6th, Mars enters Leo or Simha. Um, so Mars is going to continue to aspect Rahu. So again, there's going to be a lot of activity through the summer on Aquarian. So again, Aquarius is a fixed air sign. So a lot of fixed ideas. Um, and the thing is, like, it's not too surprising because Saturn was in Aquarius the last 2.5 years, and Saturn was protecting Aquarius. So Saturn is like antiquity and structures delay. So it was like protecting, and Saturn's a owner, a ruler of Aquarius. So it was protecting Aquarius. It was protecting old ideas and paradigms. But now that like shifted and that dropped off and there was like a crack, and probably blew up, some old ideas. Now it's like now how do we, move forward? Like what are the new ideas, new activities? If the old stuff is gone and fallen away, like what's new? So that's part of what's on deck here. So June 6th, Mars enters Leo or Simha. This is a fixed fire sign. It's also a friend sign for Mars. But that means like there's gonna be a lot of activity. And the other thing is that Ketu is there. So just whenever we have Mars and Ketu together, there's always like explosive, aggressive energy, accidents, injuries, could literally be fires because we have two fire planets in a fixed fire sign. So that could be like in the past, I've seen like last year, was it last year or beginning of this year? It was beginning of this year, actually, January. We had like those fires, forest fires going on in LA. Yeah, that was like a K2 Mars kind of situation. And then a couple of years back in the fall, we had, how was it in Lebanon? We had the cell phones exploding in people's hands in Lebanon. And the year before that, we had Israel getting bombed. So you can see like there's that kind of energy going on here. A lot of fire in one place is usually like unchecked is, can indicate these sorts of things. Then June 7th, Sun enters Mrigashirasha Nakshatra. So Sun is moving out of Rohini, where it was nice and cozy. And now it's like seeking, searching and seeking. So seeking purpose, maybe employment, because Sun represents career. It might also be a health kick of some kind, because Sun represents health. So maybe people are getting on board with some sort of like, June, July, August type health kick. Then June 15th, Sun enters Gemini, Mithuna. So there's going to be a lot of energy regarding ideas and thoughts in the mind, enthusiasm, maybe with writing, speaking, learning, that sort of thing. June 19th, Mars has an exact aspect on Saturn. So that's also pretty tough, because again, we have two natural malefic planets clashing, kind of like Mars with Rahu. So this might be more of a physical break, though, because Mars and Saturn are more physical type planets. And this might be like two different things, actually, because Mars and Saturn also represent property. So, and Saturn is in a dual sign. So this could be like a dual break or sudden restructuring that happens going on here. Um, Yeah, and June 20th, we have solstice. Again, it's going to be Dakshinayana. I'm going to do a whole separate video on that, so stay tuned for that toward the end of the month. June 21st, Sun enters Ardra Nakshatra. So I've been talking about Ardra a lot. Ardra also represents things like chemical medicine, homeopathy, psychology, sadness, and also digital electric type of work. So with Sun there, these are the sorts of things that might be kind of coming to the forefront. June 30th, Mars enters Purva Falguni Nakshatra. So this might be, again, it's getting closer and closer to K2. It's not, crossing K2 yet, but this, since Purva Falguni is about like the finer things of life and partying and stuff like this could be like a sudden emotional or physical release of some kind, like kind of part, but like, not like going to somebody's house for a nice quiet dinner party. This is like this might be kind of acting out a little bit, like erratic or destructive actions in a public forum, because this is all happening in Leo. So, again, K2 and Mars are inching closer to each other, and then they're gonna, cross in July. So this is sort of the lead up to that happening. Yeah, so some of this kind of stuff might be going on. So here's the second famous chart. So this is the Archduke Ferdinand of Austria, Austria-Hungary, I guess, who was assassinated. So this happened June 28th, 1914. So this is sort of deemed to be like this triggering event for the beginning of World War One. Was this guy and his wife actually getting assassinated in Sarajevo in Bosnia and Herzegovina at that time? And you can see right at the top here, since I was just talking about Mars and K2 and Leo and destructive explosive energy, we have Mars and K2 with the moon in Leo, which actually is happening today, June 1st. So, yeah, mental, physical, public outbreak, destructive actions. Yeah, so all the above, right? So here's a good chart to exemplify that. So, yeah, Lagna Nakshatra is a Sandhi Uttara Falguni, so there's an enjoyment with purpose here again. Sandhi, you can see that the time here is at 10:45 a.m. Sarajevo, Bosnia. Sandhi, because you can see like we're really just like minutes away from shifting to Virgo Lagna here. But that's going to bring instability to not only the first house but the whole chart because the Lagna is Sandhi. So yeah, that's pretty tough. It doesn't help situation at all. And it seemed like a very chaotic. When I was reading through the course of events that day, I was like, wow, this just sounds like it sort of almost didn't happen. Like, because from what I gathered, it was like there's so much detail I can't retain it all in my head. But it was like what happened was there were six guys, assassins, who were planted on the road at different spots where the Archduke and his wife were driving through. And they were all very young. I think all five out of six of them were under the age of 20 or 20 or younger. So they're basically kids, really. I mean, and this part I also didn't know before was that apparently they were trained and armed and loaded and provided with safe houses and all this kind of stuff by the top military intelligence of Serbia. These are like trained child assassins, okay? And there were six of them. They were planted along the road so that at least one of them, I guess, would do the deed. And they were given like bombs and guns and all this kind of stuff. And several of the guys did not act. Okay. One of them, I think it was not the first one, but maybe the second one, threw a bomb. And so, like, it was starting to hit the fan, and a few people were injured or died from, I think like 15 or 20 people were injured or died from the first bomb. It didn't hit the car that the Archduke and his wife were in. But, because of the chaos that was going on, like the Archduke was supposed to talk after the governor and kind of interrupted the governor. It was sort of like getting agitated and was like almost cut him off completely because he's like, here I am visiting your country and we're getting bombed. Like, what kind of reception is this? Like, he was getting ticked off. And then his wife, I think, kind of calmed him down, like, okay, don't, make this worse because things are already I think was her move there. And then they went to the hospital where the injured people were from the first bomb. And then they took off and they started driving again because I think they were supposed to inspect the military or something like that. Because the reason why the Archduke was there was that the Austrian-Hungarian government was given the Yugoslavian area by the Ottoman Empire to oversee or administrate. So that's what they were doing, but the ethnic groups there were not, cahoots, were not okay with that. So for I don't know specific reasons, but generally people like to be taken over by new governments. So there's always some sort of challenge there, right? So anyway, usually. So they're driving back from the hospital, continuing on their way, and it was suggested by some people to change their route, but the message didn't completely go through. So they didn't get the driver didn't get the message or something, and so they start to see they're getting like hemmed in on the road, and then the driver tried to back up the car, and then it stalled the car, and it happened that it was right next to the guy who, the whatever fifth or sixth child assassin, who basically shot the Archduke and his wife at point blank range. Yeah, it was pretty like I was like, wow, this is like intense, man. But you could see like, it almost didn't happen. Like there was a bomb, but it didn't, kill the Archduke, do the job. And then there was some bombs, so there was some warning. I mean, they could have ducked for cover, but they didn't. Still trying to like maintain face, or appearances. I mean, it was sort of interesting. I mean, I was just like, they didn't seem particularly alarmed that a bomb got thrown their way. People They just went to the hospital to like, I don't know. It was such a strange kind of story. I was surprised by many aspects of it. But anyway, So the sun is in Ardra, and you can see sun is in the 11th house of clubs, group, and society. So, and we've got Saturn there again. Saturn's in Mrigashirsha. So Saturn, so seeking structure uh, to like a sudden strike to the, you know, person in charge to seek restructuring and restructuring of ideology, essentially, is what we're getting from the 11th house here. But again, Ardra is bringing sadness and again, group flash storm, which it was. I mean, again, I don't know why they kept going. But they did. So, anyway. The day lord is Sun, the Hara lord is Mars. So Sun and Mars are two leadership planets, two fire planets as well. So we're more fuel on the fire here that's going on. And then you can see the birth shot was K2. So we're picking up this K2, unusual, hidden, unexpected flash fire energy, which could literally be the flash of a pistol. Mercury is and Venus are in the 12th house of losses, and Venus and Mercury are lords of the second house of communication and the third house of written communication, oral communication, written communication, and neighbors, family, and what else do we have that's picking up? And then work that's being done in clubs, groups. So you can see that there's like losses through um, family, friends, relationships, ideas here, at stake. It's all just getting thrown, all the sort of, and you can see the benefic planets, Venus and Mercury and Jupiter, they're all aspecting each other, all very strong, but they're all like Jupiter is debilitated in the 6th house of enemies, and Venus and Mercury in the 12th house. Like the good benefic planets can't do much here, and they're aspecting each other, but in negative houses, but they're not aspecting any of these other like K2 Mars, moon's getting, swamped by all this like erratic, violent energy, frankly. Um, yeah, it's like it's a mess. So K2 Mercury, Venus, Jupiter. Again, explosive energy, sudden loss of good, and enemies all over the place. And Venus, the 6th house is overt enemies, and then the 12th house is like hidden enemies. So all the benefic planets are in negative houses. I mean, the other thing is this Jupiter is also sandhi. It's also in the last degree of Capricorn. Jupiter's debilitating Capricorn in the 6th house. This could literally be like child enemies, which is what it was. I mean, I was like, wow, I didn't know all that detail. I mean, it's sort of like, wow, okay. So anyway, and then what happened after this is that basically after this guy and his wife were assassinated, basically the Austro-Hungarian government declared war on Serbia, and then that's the official beginning of World War One. But this was the precipitating triggering event that led to that very quickly after this happened. So how does this chart recreate the current sky pattern? Well, Jupiter and Saturn are sandhi. So again, in this chart, they've recently changed signs, and they have recently changed signs for us as well in the last couple months. Jupiter just changed signs like a couple of weeks ago. Saturn 2 months ago, which is a short amount of time for Saturn since it's so slow moving. And we have Mars and K2 and Leo. Well, that's happening pretty soon. Um, and then Sun is in Gemini Ardra again. Rahu is in Aquarius. That's the same. And Saturn is aspecting Sagittarius and Pisces. So we have Saturnian energy on Jupiter. So you can see Jupiterian signs. So you could see like we have a Saturn dominated Jupiter here, because Jupiter is in the sign of Saturn, and Saturn is aspecting the two signs ruled by Jupiter. So Saturn, this like seeking destruction of governments in a very, you know, lightning bolt type of way is, basically the goodness that Jupiter can bring is being buried by Saturn. Yeah, these old grievances. So anyway, so let's go through house by house. So again, Leo, Simha, rising, fixed fire sign. So just constant activity. Mars, Moon, and Maga. So that's going to be Maga is symbolized by a throne. So again, there's a rebellious mind about the government or ruler here, and Ketu's in Purva Falguni, so this is like a destruction of kind of the finer things or like social milieu here. So this could be like maybe there was some looks like there's some loss of economic or financial means here because Mercury is the lord of both the 11th house of income as well as the second house of assets. So maybe they thought these rulers were living off the backs of laborers or something like that. Although it seemed like I was reading even farther back from this particular event, like apparently that whole area was just completely destructive at the time. Like apparently before this happened, there was a ruler, king, queen, or something like that in Serbia, and they were assassinated and like I don't know, stabbed multiple times and then like dropped off their balcony into public view just to like really, like shock and awe, like don't mess with us, physical. I mean, I was, and this is like, the Serbians with their own government, their own leaders. I was just like, wow, like this is pretty hardcore going on here. So at that time, yeah. So I was like, and then the top Serbian military intelligence like arming and training these like young kids to like go assassinate. I was like, and so apparently this assassination thing was sort of like a trendy thing for a while where people like these assassination people were like becoming heroes, public heroes, and people were like, oh, I want to be like. It's like, wow. I was like, wow, that's a pretty, and so you can see like this, Mars K2 moon, like it was just a very destructive, fiery, and then you see like K2 and Rahu. Ketu and Rahu can symbolize mental health problems, and Moon there as well. When you get Moon on the Rahu Ketu axis, that'll give you even more mental health type issues. And then Mars there, Mars is going to bring like impulsive, compulsive, obsessive energy. Like this is a very hardcore, especially when you have all the benefics off in the corners and negative houses and Jupiter debilitated. I was like, wow, like this is pretty hardcore. Not just this moment, but this moment in time. And then the thing that's what's also the thing that happened is like, this K2 Mars Moon, like a very self-destructive energy. At the end of all this, like World War I happened, and at the end of all of it, like Yugoslavia got broken up into like little pieces, and there was like no longer a single unit there. So yeah, it all backfired essentially on these guys. So yeah, anyway, intense stuff here. So Mars and Moon and Maga again, problems with obsessive thinking and actions regarding the government. Ketu's in Purva Falguni, so maybe a lack or separation of finer living there or enjoyments. It's like completely destructive. To all that. And then on top of that, this K2 Mars Moon is aspected by Saturn. So So it's like, wow, like it's like, wow, this is a pretty hardcore, yeah, it's a chart here. So again, Saturn is unstable and again looking for dramatic, erratic change with the government, yeah, military leaders and so explosive public seeking to re-engineer a throne authority is what I wrote here. We do have a Pravraja yoga. That's the K2 Mars and Moon at the top here. It gives it focus. And we have Chandramangala yoga. So again, it looks like property and finances were, at stake here. We have a Kala Sarpa yoga again, so ambitious energy, lunar, solar yogas. So there was a little bit of protection here, but not enough, clearly, to override this K2 Mars Moon square combination. It's like, wow. And then the Chitragraha, so these are planets of vulnerability. Well, we have Jupiter and Venus, so forget compassion and diplomacy. Those are, in the toilet, essentially. Mars and Moon. So again, this like aggressive, hostile mindset, like essentially with this, like, and hidden enemies, hidden children, child enemies, and hostile takeover is what is essentially what's going on here. Um, yeah, then the second house lord is Mercury. and pusha. So, forget diplomatic or, nice words. That's all gone out the window. And it's aspected by sandhi debilitated Jupiter and Ganishta. So a disruption in the rhythm of speech with distant groups, like foreign groups, and is what we're getting here. So again, the Austrian, Austrian-Hungarian, administrators were just seen, very negatively, and so they're like, forget talking and all this. We're gonna we're gonna do things our own way. The third house lord is Venus. Again, Venus is in Ashlesha. So that's the thing is third house is siblings and neighbors, and they have also gone to the 12th house of losses and expenditures, and they're in Ashlesha. So again, that's snake energy. So there's some sort of mesmerizing, ambitious energy to end diplomacy by neighbors, kind of ambitious neighbors, because Rahu's aspecting the third house. So Um, yeah, and also loss of neighbors, loss of attention, loss of money, finances. That's all on the table here. Fourth house lord is Mars, aspect its own sign, so that's going to be very strong. But again, that's like um, protecting, leading home, homeland, home happiness. This could also be a deep transformation of those things. Also, like a historical authority line, like because again, Austro-Hungary was just sort of a middleman for the Ottoman Empire before that all went down. Yeah, so this is kind of yeah. Then the fifth house lord of retrograde, debilitated Jupiter. It's gone to the sixth house of acute issues, aspected by Sun and Saturn. Unstable rhythm, seeking to transform structure on government public stage, and also I would say, government-backed child assassin, I would say. So, in the sixth house lord is a bhavam Saturn. So, kind of like the UN charter signed chart. Again, this is trying to end ongoing losses. In a very different. This is like the exact opposite way of the UN charter. At least the UN charter, there was a lot of thought and debate and discussion, unanimous action. I mean, this is like a hostile takeover, literally. So, seeking to end lack of compassion in the daily lives of enemies, multiple issues, and again, children, being problematic here. Seventh house lord is Saturn. The Rahu's there in Shatabisha. So this is like things that are hard to ameliorate, like ambition, hard to ameliorate energy in the seventh house of partners, independent business. And it's also aspected by dark moon and Mars. So, again, obsessive thoughts, actions, ambition, and changing the ideology. Because again, we're talking about fixed, ideology here with the fixed air sign of Aquarius. So, whatever's going on here, I mean, this is like, not just like and because at first it just, when I was reading about this, it said, oh, some students, a Serbian student did this. And I thought, oh, okay, was he just a mental health case or stressed out about school or something? But when I saw, like, all the, like, planning and training and support, I was like, wow, I mean, they just picked up these kids and the kids did dirty work for them. I was like, why did they even, like, get these kids involved? Why didn't they just get some grown-ups to do it, who could, like, face up to what they're, organized here? I don't know, I didn't understand why they need to get, like, kids, young kids, impressionable kids involved with it. That's what they do, right? I mean, to, like, create new generations of who have that same really hardcore energy, mental energy and ideology. So that's what's going on. Yeah. So eighth house lord is Jupiter again. So these short-term issues are actually long-term, and then we've got Mars and Saturn aspecting here. So again, seeking to end the throne and this hidden engineering, because this eighth house can be like hidden engineering. And also some deep psychology going on here. So it's like changing the minds of kids, in future generations, which I guess is what happened. And then the ninth house lord is Mars. So that's also going to be like an unstable foreign, even violent government or authority here. Um, then the 10th house lord is Venus. It's gone in the 12th house. It's aspected by Jupiter. So this is like shocking sudden loss of the motorcade. I think this is like literally the events of you know, uh, the bombs and the guns going on with the motorcade of the Archduke through Sarajevo. In the 11th house lord is Mercury. That's also gone in the 12th house. So losses here of clubs, group, society, income. Sun is with a combust Saturn. So unseen enemies seeking public loss of the king. So yeah, it's all true. Then the 12th house here, 12th house lord is Moon with Venus and Mercury. Loss of groups, family, money, siblings. There's like a lot of loss going on here. I mean, pretty destructive time. So yeah, I think I mentioned all this stuff. He and his wife were shot by a student driving through the capital. And then there was an objective to free Bosnia-Herzegovina from Austrian-Hungarian rule. Hungary declared war on Serbia not too long after this, which started World War One. And again, the training and armament of top Serbian military for these young guys doing the deed here, these young assassins. And essentially it ended up, again, destroying the whole Yugoslavian area. So yeah, but anyway, again, this is just it's pretty hardcore here, but you can see that this Mars and K2 situation can be, especially in the specific moments in time, can be very destructive. So there you go. Okay, so on this slide, we have the slow-moving planets, Jupiter, Guru, Saturn, Shani, Rahu, Ketu. June 4th. So some of this I've already talked about, so I'm going to go pretty fast through the slide so we don't go on and on. But June 4th, again, there was a Mars has an exact aspect on Rahu. See the previous slides. June 8th through 9th, planetary war between Mercury and Jupiter. The new thing, though, June 9th, Jupiter goes combust for a month. So I have a whole video on Venus and Jupiter combust, since Jupiter is considered to be one of the great natural benefics. It being combust meaning it means that the outer aspects, the outer manifestations of Jupiter will not be seen for a whole month. And Jupiter again represents fairness, equality, generosity, diplomacy, education, children, money, banking, finance. So a lot of these things will be off kilter and not going well, frankly, for that month that Jupiter's combust. Last year in May, we had Jupiter and Venus both simultaneously combust, and that's when we had in the United States, at least. We had a bunch of university students, so Jupiter University education students protesting, current, different activities going on in the Middle East. And then they ended up, vandalizing and protesting and kind of locking themselves down on, and it ended up calling in like police forces and stuff like that to deal with it. It was just like a really kind of crazy, chaotic scene. So we might have some of that as well coming up. Okay, so you can see how this is like, gonna be a bit, towards as we go through the end of the month, it'll get a little bit more intense, let's say. Then June 13th, Jupiter also enters Ardha Nakshatra, which we've been talking about this whole talk so far. So sadness associated with the above, also child psychology, because again, Ardha represents psychology and Jupiter. Yeah. And it can also be because of Ardha, the electricity energy related to Ardha could be like learning or speaking, technology, that sort of thing. So the other thing is that the houses that are ruled by Jupiter, like Sagittarius and Pisces, there could be pretty big potential losses here. Let's put it that way. Especially because Saturn is in Uttar in Pisces, aspecting Sagittarius as well. So you have Saturn, the planet of death and destruction, on the funeral pyre, aspecting these two sides, and then Jupiter goes combust. That can be pretty hardcore. So the good news, the silver lining is that Jupiter is still a benefic planet. So whatever change or endings or destruction that happens is actually for the benefit of the soul. Like it might be, the end or destruction of things that really need to go anyway, and that maybe they've been sort of limping along, or you've been kind of clinging to them and that sort of thing. So even though the changes might be abrupt or painful, generally still for the betterment, and especially Jupiter also represents spiritual development. So there might actually be like some spiritual epiphanies, ascension things type going on. The last time Jupiter was in Ardra was in 2012, and then 2001/2. So just personally, for me, actually, I'm sort of, I have a personal history with Jupiter and Ardra. So in 2012, actually, my father passed away. So it brought a lot of sadness, but it also brought a lot of development spiritually as well, because the sadness and the grief it brought me, I didn't really feel like doing anything or talking to anybody or anything like that. It really brought me internal. Um, and it really made me think about my own path and purpose and that sort of thing. And like, what was I doing with my time, and how much time did any of us have? And was I really using my life and vital force and time and energy in the best ways? Given that we all have a limited amount of time, on this planet in this incarnation. So that kind of stuff happened to me in 2012. And 2001 too. And 2012 was probably a little bit similar to this one because it was fairly short, like Jupiter sort of just zipped through, um, Gemini and Ardra pretty quickly. But 2001 and 2, Jupiter basically spent 12 months, or not 12, 10 months in Gemini, a lot of it in Ardra, because basically what happened was Jupiter went through Ardra and then retrograded. So basically, Jupiter like went through Ardra, backed up through Ardra, and went through Ardra again. And again, in my life, that basically everything in my life pretty much burned down, except my apartment. I left graduate school. My personal relationship ended. My health was probably one of the worst it's ever been. Um, Money, jobs, all of it gone. No savings. I mean, I'm not even sure how I survived that time, but I remember, not in the middle of it, but a little bit after. I remember thinking basically everything in my life burned down except for spirit, except for if you want to call it that. And that's, I think, when I had probably the biggest shift in my spiritual development ever. Because I was just like, what am I doing with my life? I'm not happy with this. And that's why I left graduate school. And it was just like slowly, one day at a time, one foot from the other, like rebuilding my life in a new direction. But mostly like rebuilding my internal mindset and soul sets, soul direction. Um, and that's, and again, it was painful, like literally painful. I could barely get out of bed, and for a while. But then I ended up getting into natural medicine and becoming a naturopathic physician, and started taking yoga classes. So that led me into that whole world. And there was a Vedanta society, literally just a few blocks from my house, that I'd never stepped into, but I started going to classes and learning about, Eastern and Indian philosophy and spirituality, and um, and here I am, what almost what something 20 something years later. So it totally like it was scary, but it was still ultimately um, better. so, so anyway, maybe just a few words in case anybody else experiences that over the summer. 'Cause, again, it looks like the summer is going to be a bit intense, but hopefully, again, ultimately for the best and towards a future direction. All right, and then June 19th, Mars has an exact aspect on Saturn, which I've discussed previously on another slide, so you can check that out. And then we have the moon. So the moon transits in June, and I have separate videos on the new and full moon every month, so I get into a lot of detail there, but a lot more detail there. But June 11th, there's going to be a full moon or Purnima in Scorpio, Vrishika, and Jesta. Scorpio is a debilitation sign for moon. It's a fixed water sign, so a lot of emotion, deep transformational emotion there. But there's also going to be an aspect of Sun and Mars related to this. And so, yeah, so again, the two fire planets. So we're going to get more of the physical, kind of law enforcement, protection, defense, leadership mode type energy. Yeah, it's going to be fairly intense, I would say, the full moon. And then the new moon is also intense because we're in Ardra. So both of these are pretty strong, intense nakshatras. Okay. So we're just seeing more of the intensity building basically by the end of the month. So the new moon Amavasya is happening in Gemini, Midtuner, and Ardra. This is a friend sign for the moon, which will help a little bit, not enough, probably. It won't feel like enough, but in a dual air sign, so a lot of ideas. And it will also be a Sudarshan Lagna, meaning the Lagna and the moon and sun were all going to be in the same constellation house. So that means there's going to be a lot of strength and, again, focus here. Moon is going to be conjoined with Sun, Jupiter, and Mercury through parivartana. Okay, because Mercury is going to be in Cancer, but Moon is in Gemini. Since Gemini is owned by Mercury and Cancer is owned by Moon, you could essentially swap them. So you're going to have essentially Moon, Sun, Jupiter, Mercury in Gemini. That's a lot more thinking, talking, debating going on there because Moon and Mercury are logical mind, intuitive mind. Moon and Jupiter are intuition. Jupiter and Mercury are writing, publishing, talking, news. Uh, yeah, so there's going to be strength and protection and intelligence because this is all going to be under basically Mercury dominated moments. There's going to be some protection, intelligent wisdom, but also probably sadness and news regarding the inner circle because again, there's going to be tension between first and second house issues. Yeah. So, yeah. So anyway, more intensity along those lines. All right. So we have our last famous chart here next. Okay. So here we have a chart for the Treaty of Versailles that was signed. So in the last chart, we talked about Archduke Ferdinand getting assassinated, which is the beginning of World War One. This was the end of World War One. So, and what's interesting is they're literally 5 years apart on June 28th. So I thought that was also interesting. Yeah, so, and you can also see that we have Jupiter, Moon, Sun, and Mars and Mercury, not Mercury, in Gemini here. So we're going to have this gaggle of planets, rolling through and conjoined in Mercury, at the end of the month. And that's what we're seeing here in this chart. Okay. So this moment in time happened June 28th, 1919, 15:12 p.m. in Versailles, France, exactly 5 years later from the assassination of Archduke Ferdinand. The Lagna nakshatra here is Swati. Swati is symbolized by new grown grass blowing in the wind, so a very fragile beginning, that kind of energy. The Sun nakshatra is an ardor again, so sudden shift in leadership. Um, you know, uh, and the Moon nakshatra is in Punarvasu, so there's a cycling of the mind here. And again, this cycling that's happening with Moon and Jupiter is, again, I think, debate, discussion, writing, that sort of thing, because the Jupiter, Moon, Sun, and Mars happening is that pravraja yoga is in the ninth house of government and institution, but it's also aspecting the third house of written communication. So there was all this, I think it was like 6 months of negotiations that were going on because the Treaty of Versailles was not the actual end of fighting that happened before. This was kind of like the now that we've had a little time to think about this, how are we going to restructure things moving forward? And also, frankly, like kind of a punitive, punishment type of situation for Germany. Because part of what happened was that part of this So the treaty here was that it literally stated it was like a war guilt. They called it the war guilt clause, where apparently they said Germany took full responsibility for any and all destruction that happened, in Europe. I mean, it was like, very like, and the thing, what was interesting too, I didn't realize that there was a relationship between World War One and World War Two, is that there was this treaty that was signed, formulated and signed, but it was so harsh, um, that basically German governments or Germans started resenting this, and it created bitterness, and that's what sort of fueled the Nazi movement in the beginning of World War Two. So I was like, oh, I wasn't aware of that link before. So that was also interesting. Yeah, that's actually is. I think I mentioned this before. Like history was probably my least favorite subject in high school. Not political philosophy. I found that interesting, but but history itself, it just seemed like a bunch of wars and dates and stuff that I was just like, okay. But actually, looking at these things through the lens of astrology makes it much more interesting, at least to me. Especially all these backstories and stuff. I was like, wow, this is actually pretty interesting stuff. I'm not sure why I wasn't into it, when I was in high school, but there you go. So we all grow and develop over time, I guess. So anyway, the moon nextstretch is Punarvasi. So there's the cycling of the mind, going back and forth. The day lord is Saturn. Saturn is in Maga, so again, the throne nakshatra. So structuring, ending of government structure. The Hurrah lord was Sun, so leadership again from the top leadership. Burtisha, Jupiter, Saturn, Venus, Ketu. So Jupiter is again the writing, publishing, debating, talking, discussions. Saturn is the restructuring of governments or the throne. Venus is diplomacy, and Ketu is well, Saturn and Ketu are both in the 12th, 8th house here. So this is like, you know, strange, unexpected, long-term destruction. This is essentially what this is like a reformulation to prevent and repair and basically retribution for all the destruction that happened. Like, I can't even remember all the statistics, but apparently France was the most decimated physically of all the countries in Europe, and they lost something like 25% of the men from the ages of 18 to 30. I mean, that's like incredible. In Britain, they didn't suffer so much physical destruction because they were, a channel away from Europe, but financially they were really hard, hit pretty hard. So, um, yeah, so all this together, Jupiter, Saturn, Venus, K2 is like writing changes, in terms of leadership, diplomacy, and ending, this long-term, bizarre, wild, destructive time that happened with World War One. And how this chart recreates a current sky pattern. So again, Jupiter, Sun, Mercury, and Moon are in Gemini, because we do actually have a parivartana between Mercury and Moon. So we have Sun, Moon, Jupiter, and Mercury, all four planets in Gemini, like we will have by the end of the month. And then Mars is not there. Mars will be in Leo, but And then Saturn is aspect in Taurus, which it currently does, and Mercury is also in Cancer, which it will be. Okay. So the lugna here is Libra or Tula. It's a movable air sign, so a lot of ideas going on here. And this Saturn sitting in the 11th house of income, clubs, groups. So again, a change and restructuring of groups and income there, because there were also like monetary reparations that were part of this treaty here that Germany had to pay out literally. Saturn is exalted in Libra here. So yeah, this is very much like a almost like a business financial repayment type of energy here at the top. So group structural changes, leadership, generating many ideas and talks, and new seeds of development. So again, we have a pravraja yoga, focus yoga on the four planets in the ninth house. We have kala sarpa yoga again, ambition. We have a saraswati yoga here, the Venus, Jupiter, and Mercury. Those placements give a creativity. Lunar and solar yogas here, because Venus and Mercury are in the second house from Moon and Sun, so that should provide some eloquence and support here. There's a parivartana between Mercury and Moon. the Chandra Mangala Yoga, so again, property and money on the table, literally. The other thing is that you can see Sun, the lord of the 11th house, is in this pravraja, and Mars, the lord of the second house, is in this pravraja yoga. And the 11th house is about income, and the second house is about assets. So, you know, that's all. This is about money as well. There's also potentially a Gajacesari yoga. Gajacesari, that has to do with the relative placements of Jupiter and Moon, which they are together, but usually to qualify, you want benefics on it. And you sort of do because of the parivartana with Mercury and Moon. So it might be a stretch, but there's Gajacesari is all about like networking, creating a network or alliance, which is what you're doing here. So all that's going on. The Chitragraha is here. Jupiter, so writing and law and so Jupiter and Mars together will give you law, and then with Moon, public law. So and Jupiter will give you governance. So public govern law, governance, and writing about it. Creating this treaty, getting it signed. So Jupiter and Moon and Mercury are all there. So and Moon and Venus and Mercury, those are all like, well, Jupiter and Venus are the two diplomacy planets, so and they're benefics. That's nice. Moon is not a benefic here because it's new. Mercury is a benefic because it's with Venus, but there is some diplomacy going on here with the public mind. But you can see there's also a lot of anger because you have Sun and Mars, the two fire planets, with the Moon. So there's public outrage here with what's gone down. And the Moon and Venus are the two emotional planets, and Moon and Mercury are the two mind planets. So it's like trying to, I mean, even though they probably went, I don't know if they went to, I mean, some historians say they went too hardcore and then it triggered the World War II, but um, there is, I guess it seems like something needed to be done to make it seem like there was some balance or justice brought to all the destruction that happened in Europe. Like bringing justice to the mind and heart of the public, even if it was, too much or too little or whatever people had to say about it. At least it was some attempt or gesture. Because the third house can also be not only writing, but like nonverbal communication. So a gesture. Yeah. So second house lord is combust Mars, and that's gone to the ninth house here in Mrigashirsha. So so you're trying to find like aggressively seeking some sort of foreign alliance here, I would say, trying to create some sort of inner circle to probably prevent issues from popping up. Because again, we have Jupiter is sandhi, and Jupiter is the lord of the sixth house of acute issues and enemies. So bringing justice, to enemies, that's kind of thing. Rahu's there, and Anurata, that's actually kind of nice. At least Anurata is victory nakshatra, but victory through forming alliances, and Rahu's ambition. So ambition to form a victory alliance, aggressively seeking to kind of how do I say mm, deal with enemies, hidden enemies, and aggression and that sort of thing. Yeah. So the third house lord is Jupiter. Jupiter's in Punarvasu. So this is like trying, debating and trying to find ways to bring balance and justice to the situation. Plus Sun, Moon, Mercury, Mars. So the two leadership planets, the two mind planets. So again, trying to bring some sense of justice to the minds of the public. And again, third house is neighbors and siblings as well. So this is like neighboring countries, leadership, writing, new administrative law, hashing ideas and theories out. Because Jupiter, not Jupiter, but Sagittarius is a dual fire sign. So a lot of actions here. And then Gemini is a dual air sign, so a lot of thoughts. So a lot of thoughts and actions going back and forth, trying to figure out how to make this work, bring justice to the situation. Fourth house lord is Saturn. It's aspected by Venus. Venus is on a Shlesha again, so there's some attractive endeavor here. Mercury is in Punarvasu, and then a new moon is also aspecting there through parivartana. So attractive diplomacy ideas to bring order to the old world and old destruction that's happened, and destruction of former governing regimes, and also bringing diplomacy, goodness, and to the home front. So homes and happiness, like trying to have people, kind of settle down and find some sort of peace, whatever peace they could salvage, even if it was like bits and bobs or whatever, because it was just so destructive, the last few years. So fifth house lord is Saturn, aspects its own house. So again, this is a very strong ideology, and Jupiter as well. So again, this is bringing justice to solidifying lawful ideology in a public way. So it looks like this was not just like a lot of this was about like a public appearance. Not that it was, fluffy, like it was all appearances or just complete fluff, but it was like, you know, people needed something to happen, to rebalance the scales that had been tipped in a very negative, destructive direction. So that's what this is about. Yeah, so sixth house lord is Jupiter, sorting through legal issues regarding enemies. Uh, seventh house lord is a compass, Mars. So again, it's like seeking to eliminate a military partner path. What does that? What does that actually mean? So, because Mars, the seventh house lord has gone to the ninth house of government. So it's like, how do we uh, govern, manage, ideologically, like partnerships moving forward? Is what that means. And this could be like a loss of partners. you know. Yeah. So then the eighth house lord is Venus. K2's there in Critica, so unusual, sharp, sudden attacks, and aspected by Saturn as well. So ameliorate long-term, unusual, destructive. I said iron leadership. Iron because Saturn can represent iron, and it's on the throne there in Maga Nakshatra, and also the deep psychology. I mean, this is like this is some sort of attempt to. I mean, people were just completely messed up because of the situation, all the losses personally and friends, family, society. I mean, buildings. I mean, it was a nutty time. So all of that Saturn and K2 in the eighth house. That's the because Saturn can represent anxiety, doubt, fear, depression. K2 can represent mental health issues. Like in some ways, this whole Treaty of Versailles was a way to publicly assuage some of the deep um, destructive psychology that went on from the years before him. So the ninth house lord is Mercury, aspects its own sign through parivartana, it's in Punarvasu, so it's going back and forth. So again, Mercury and Jupiter and Punarvasu going back and forth, speaking, talking, reading. Moon and Mars as their Sun is karako bhava nasha. So Sun represents like the king or president, and the ninth house represents like government. So Sun in the ninth house usually indicates like problems with government or authority. So this could be like rethinking, rewriting difficult military leadership and power, mentally, because the two mind planets are there. But Sun is in Ardra. So I'm thinking that, and again, Ardra is like the storm cloud with the electric, the lightning coming down, the electric lightning coming down. When I saw this, I thought blitzkrieg, which was like the term they used for the German military offensive, like sudden offensive in World War II. So, and this is in Gemini here. So it's like there's a dual kind of thought about this rewriting of, through the Treaty of Versailles. So again, this could also be two different actions because Sun and Mars are the two fire planets, two active planets, decision making, leadership planets. So it's like there's a divide here. And so it's like probably, what I could see here is that like they thought it was going to go one way, and kind of what they're trying to do is they're trying to like keep Germany contained from doing this again. And it did it again like a few years later. So I don't know how much good, this did. And actually, from some of the accounts, like it was such a harsh treaty, that it actually fueled World War II. Like it made, I don't know. So anyway, um, yeah, so there's probably some fallout that was not anticipated from this attempt to again bring some sort of public justice to what happened. But yeah. Then the 10th house lord of the new moon, and we've got Venus and Mercury there. So shocking but attractive public mental health diplomacy action here. The 11th house lord of the sun. Again, it's an Ardra, and then Saturn is there. So groups are shocked by the change in leadership. Like, I don't know, maybe they were shocked by the leadership, or maybe they were shocked by this. Like, maybe, I don't know if something like this had happened before, or maybe the fact that it was so strongly written and advised. Maybe that was a shocking part. I don't know exactly, but yeah, there was some sort of shocking. It could also be the shocking losses or destruction of groups and societies through, uh, maybe the German government, that sort of thing. Yeah. So the 12th house lord is Mercury. And so this is like, again, trying to bring some sort of mental order to overseas global diplomacy moving forward. Again, whether it was effective or not, I don't know. I'm not a historian, I'm not an expert on this kind of history, but at least there were some people thought that this actually fueled World War II, which is interesting. So again, there were 6 months of negotiations on this Treaty of Versailles, putting it all together. And what it did was it disarmed Germany. They had to concede territory. They had to extradite, so-called prisoners, and they had to put their leaders on trial because I guess there was no precedent for that before. Um, because they should have, I guess, maybe previously would have been tried in their own country, but because Germany was so biased in a certain direction, they didn't feel like true justice would happen if Germany tried their leaders, Nazi leaders or whatever. So they had to put them on trial. Um, they had to recognize the states that they usurped and give them back their independence. There were some monetary reparations as well. And again, full responsibility for any and all destruction that happened during the world. And then, but apparently it might have fueled World War II. So pretty wild stuff. But you can see again, kind of like the UN Charter, all these planets in Mercury, a lot of writing, a lot of debating, a lot of negotiation, a lot of decision making, a lot of ideology, like a lot of, like a brainchild type energy going on here. Okay, so thanks so much for stopping by, listening to one of my talks. Again, I always appreciate all your support on the channel. Everybody who's liking and commenting and viewing and subscribing and sharing and sending in donations. It's just, I don't know, it's just all so amazing to me. Yeah, so thanks so much for all of that. Again, all my teaching videos on the subject of Vedic astrology are my concepts playlist. They can be found there. For plenty more famous charts, check out my birth chart archive of 2025 video for a list of all the famous charts I've analyzed on the channel and the videos you can find them in. I do offer individual birth chart readings. If that's interesting to you, you can email heartlightastro@yahoo.com for more info on that. I do have another YouTube channel on natural medicine where I talk about other well, not other, but Ayurveda, which is traditional Indian medicine, and yoga. So those are other Vedic arts besides the Jyotish. And then I talk about other paradigms of medicine, homeopathy, naturopathic medicine. And the name of that channel is Nature Source Care. So that's another resource for you as well. So as always, I hope you found this talk helpful, useful, and interesting to you as you learn to navigate the energy cycles of your own life. All right, so take good care, everybody, and hang in there. Looks like things are heating up this month. So, all right, we'll talk again soon. Bye-bye. Namaste.